Welcome to the Reboot Chronicles, connecting you to the world's top leaders and CEOs rebooting their organizations and themselves with revealing stories to help you prosper in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean DeBias, and as a serial CEO who's led dozens of companies that created thousands of jobs and billions in revenue, my passion is uncovering powerful lessons that can inspire you to reboot your organization, your career, and your life. Listen and subscribe wherever you get podcasts or at rebootchronicles.com. I'd like to welcome Steve Robinson to the Reboot Chronicles show. Steve is the founding chief marketing officer of Chick-fil-A, where he and the founder built the most unconventional franchise model by doing something the world's top corporations struggle with a lot, prioritizing people over profits. With over 3,000 locations, Chick-fil-A is one of the three brands in the U.S. with sales over $20 billion. That's right along there with McDonald's and Starbucks. In addition to CMO, Steve was also a board member and authored a fantastic book called Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A, How Faith, Cows, and Chicken Built an Iconic Brand.
There it is.
It's an inside story of Chick-fil-A and how it was rebooted to an industry leader, basically turning prevailing theories of fast food upside down while building one of the most successful and beloved brands. Steve, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Dean. Good morning.
Yeah, we've had a lot of the big dog QSR CEOs on from around the world over the years, but your reboot lessons are refreshingly different. You know, the legendary founder of Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy, hired you, I think out of Six Flags. You were running marketing over there.
That's right.
How did he convince you to come over to this little startup at the time?
Yeah. Well, I had been with, at the time, I'd been with Six Flags almost 7 years, 4 years in Atlanta. I became the marketing director for that park. My goodness, 1978, something like that. And was really enjoying it. Six Flags was a strong marketing, brand-oriented business.
Oh, yeah.
I had met Chick-fil-A, to your question. I had met some of the leaders at Chick-fil-A because we had actually approached them about building a restaurant inside the park to build their brand and create trial. Because to your comment, at that time they were, my goodness, probably only about 100 stores in 1978, 79, if that. All malls, all in the Southeast. Well, the Southeast was the footprint for Six Flags. And I'll shorten the story. We found a location. We gave a proposal. They chose not to do it. They wanted to make money on the store. And our position was, no, we're going to make money on the store, but we're going to help you build your trial and build brand. But they opted not to do it. Well, it's roughly 2 years later, in the summer of 1980, that the chief operating officer, Jimmy Collins, called me one evening at the office and said, Steve, we don't have a marketing department, and we really need to develop one. And Dean, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, I know you don't have a marketing department, or you would have done that deal with me 2 years ago. But he said, we've been doing a search. Your name keeps coming up. We know a little bit about you. I know you've got a job you love, which was true. But would you have any interest in talking to us? And Dean, my answer was an immediate yes, for a myriad of reasons. One, they were private, and Six Flags was owned by Penn Central, which had come out of the Penco Corporation bankruptcy settlement.
Yeah, I think Marriott owned them for a while too. It was a messy company.
So they were publicly owned. Prior to that, I worked for TI in Dallas, publicly owned. And so I'd had 8 years working for publicly owned companies and kind of had my fill of it because of the kind of the embedded short-term orientation of how management looks at running their business. And I had a lot more interest in building a brand experience at the park, unique to not just Six Flags, but unique to the Atlanta park. And it was a challenge because of the 90-day focus of profitability that you know the grind.
Yeah.
And so that was one big reason. Second big reason, I really appreciated their values. Um, Third big reason was I liked it. I loved the product. Fourth big reason was I loved their operating model of who actually runs the stores, independent contractors. And the fifth one, which was just a blow upside the head, was Diane and I had committed to a major stewardship program at our church just a few days before, and we didn't know how we were going to meet the commitment. And here I'm getting a phone call from Jimmy Collins. So I was not going to tell him no. I was going to explore, and that actually began a process of interviewing that went for 5 months. And I was invited to join them in January of 1981.
Nice.
And as
5 months. 5 months.
Yeah.
It sounds exhausting. I would have aborted.
It was hard.
I
It
would
was
have
actually hard.
pulled out of that one pretty quick.
In early December, I was sitting in Truett's office, the founder, Truett Cathy. And I said, Truett, I'm doing this stealth, and this is getting a little difficult. What are you looking for in the ideal marketing candidate? Am I the guy? And there was this long pause, and he said, I don't know. Whatever it is, I don't want to do it. But if we can trust each other and have fun together, then this can work. And the short of it is they hired me the following month. And when I went there, Dean, I didn't think I'd end up working there the rest of my career, but I did. I was in charge of marketing, eventually became an executive vice president, officer in the business.
Yep.
And marketing evolved to be much more than traditional marketing. It really became a brand management role. And I had a 35-year career with Chick-fil-A and then 3 more years on their board.
Yeah, so we'll jump into that in a sec. It must have been culture shock going from the big, fat, slow behemoths to a little, whip smart southern QSR chain that was about to explode. How important was, I guess, when you were there, faith in God at the company, and how did that shape the values?
Well, it was very important. Truett was a strong Christian believer, active in his church, active teaching Sunday school class for 13-year-olds for 3 or 4 decades.
Wow, that's commitment.
His attitude was, I want to live out my faith. I want the business to reflect my faith, but I'm not going to use it as a soapbox. I want to serve people, and in the process of serving people, maybe they'll ask why we're different. So there was no hesitation on his part to rely on biblical principles in how we made decisions. And I think the power that really came home crystallized for me a year and a half later when Chick-fil-A was in the middle of what the entire country was in the middle of, financial crisis of 1982, where the price of money was hitting 17-18%. Mall business suddenly stopped. Construction stopped. Retail sales dropped by more than 30%. First time ever Chick-fil-A had a sales decline. We got a cash flow problem. And it resulted in Truett asking his young executive committee, of which I was a part, to go off site and figure out how we're going to manage this cash flow crisis. We went to a hotel north of Atlanta, bunkered up in a room, and we started trying to figure out how we were going to conserve cash, give even more focus to the business for the next year. And basically less than a day, we did all the kind of things you'd expect us to do. We cut budgets, we froze hiring, we stopped all construction on stores, we froze salaries. But interestingly enough, we stayed committed to the basic marketing program for 82 because it involved some new products that we thought would help the business. One of them was Chick-fil-A nuggets. Turned out we were right. We were on the mark. But we're sitting in the room, and we've done that work in less than a day, and looking at each other. And Dan Cathy, Truett's oldest son, asked the group, maybe we're not working on the most important thing.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? Well, over half the operators and half the staff have joined us in the last 2 years, including many of you, this young executive committee. Maybe we need to be talking with Dad about what's important to him, which really came down to the question, why are we in business? Truett, why do you get up in the morning? And we spent the next 2 days talking about, why does Chick-fil-A exist? It was really incredibly eye-opening experience to hear him talk about what was really important to him. It wasn't profits. It was people. It was serving people. And we have all these ideas we capture on flip chart paper all over the room. And at the end of 2 days, we boiled it all down to a corporate purpose statement, which had never been written. It was written on Truett's heart, but it never been put on paper. To glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us, and have a positive influence on all that come in contact with Chick-fil-A. Basically, 3 big ideas.
Radical.
You want a business that would glorify God. You want a business that would be a platform to have a positive influence, positive service on people. But he was emphatic about the third point. It will only happen if we were great stewards of talent and money. And that's where I really learned what made Truett Cathy tick.
So what was that like? Would you guys? I mean, were you preying on cash flow and preying on things that needed to?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the net result was that corporate purpose, Dean, became a litmus test for almost everything we chose to do. We're looking at major initiative, major investment. It was not unusual for the conversation to turn, okay, does this initiative have potential to glorify God, have a positive influence on people, and is it the best use of our money and people? We only have X number of dollars. We only have X number of man hours. Is this the best way to spend them? Or are there better alternatives? So one of the things I learned out of that was a great corporate purpose is not only inspirational, it's practical. It forces leadership to stay focused on, it's cliche, but what is the main thing? And I'm quite frankly amazed at how many organizations don't have clarity about what their main thing is. They're focused on stockholder equity return, cash flow returns for management, but very often there is not clarity about the macro reason the business exists, and making sure everybody not only understands it, but understands what their role in it is, and then understands how to use it in making decisions. Because with the clarity of our corporate purpose, it allowed us to push more and more decision making down through the organization, empower people to make more decisions closer to the operators and closer to the customers coming to our restaurants.
Yeah, true. True that management style of leaving people alone once he trusted you.
He did. In fact, I think a great illustration of that is the number of times he called me to his office and asked me, "Why did you do that?" or what happened? Dean, never happened.
Zero?
He
never
called me to his office to confront me about a decision I made. Now, if you'll read my book, and I know you have, I made some bad choices, and I've documented some of them in the book. But his attitude and Jimmy's attitude was, as long as they still trusted you and they had confidence in you, then they were going to leave you alone to learn, make some mistakes and learn. And one big mistake, which happened in '82, that I was a part of, I went to Jimmy and Truett and apologized because it cost the business about $2 million over budget. Jimmy's answer was, "Don't worry about it. I endorsed the recommendation. I've briefed Truett on it. Besides, we've just invested $2 million in your education, and you're never going to make that mistake again."
Executive ed, we call that.
The reality was that particular mistake, which I unpacked the book, not only taught me about their empowering philosophy of leadership, but it changed how we look at marketing in the business. And I won't get in the weeds, but it completely changed the paradigm of how we went about marketing Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, you transformed marketing for fast food. It used to totally be stupid. Actually, it still is, showing high fidelity
So
pictures
the
of
industry was
bad
then,
food.
even now, is focused mainly on specific product price or discounts.
Right.
And because of this campaign that blew up, which was a couponing campaign, I just decided, you know what, we're not gonna do it like everybody else. We're not gonna coupon, we're not gonna discount. We're gonna figure out how to create enough value for the customer they're willing to pay full price. And that started multiple decades journey. How do you build a brand experience not only around food but hospitality, marketing, i.e., cows, so people fall in love with the brand, become brand advocates. You don't have to discount, you don't have to coupon, and they actually become the marketing agents of your business, and you don't even have to spend as much money to promote the brand.
Exactly. Those of you that maybe
That,
weren't around then.
that was the ultimate journey we set out on, really beginning in 1983 after that blow up. Jimmy was right. That was a $2 million education experience that transformed the business.
Yeah, and most CMOs would have been fired then. What you were able to do is then say, I'm going to transform it. We're going to be more of an entertaining, informing our audience. And you came up with the Eat More Chicken Cow campaign, which some people just loved. I encourage everyone to read the book. You're going to get a behind the scenes tour of that. And when you look at leaders today, it seems like faith really helped the company. Is there anything that leaders or maybe just employees can do to maybe better integrate their faith, whatever it is, in their
Yes.
business life? Is that even possible in
No,
today's
it's not
corporate world?
impossible at all. In fact, I would argue that it's actually a major. It can be a major advantage, and I don't mean that in a crass sort of word. Um, here's the reality. One of the one of the greatest leadership books ever written are the scriptures. You cannot read Proverbs or Psalms or Ecclesiastes or Paul's letters to the churches or Christ's Sermon on the Mount and not find principles of how to relate to people, how to communicate to people, how to serve people, how to set self aside and others first,
That's a good one.
and a heart of generosity versus getting and holding. And that all those principles, but for the most part, if they're discussed much at all in secular leadership books, they're almost afterthoughts, or they're add tos. The difference with Truett and Chick-fil-A was he was willing to make biblical principles at the center of the plate. Um, Generosity motivated this guy. Serving others motivated him. Helping entrepreneurs get into a business where they didn't have to put all their financial assets at risk, but could still be an entrepreneur, motivated him. Helping young people to find who they really were, get educated, and pursue their career in the strength of who they were, who God created them to be. It goes on and on and on, which I unpack the book. The biblical principles of generosity, stewardship, service were embedded in that business, are embedded in that business because of Truett's willing and other leaders that he empowered, including me, to live out biblical principles.
Yeah, and I like the way you tie them into leadership. That's missing in most books if you're trying to blend these two. Things like surrounding yourself with people you trust and give them the freedom to
Yes,
operate,
yes,
writing down your purpose, but actually living it. Most big companies have a hard. I mean, I've had all the big dog CEOs on the program when they're over 20 billion, like you guys actually are. It's really hard. I think
it is.
you were true. You say if you don't do that, it's worthless. Why are you even writing it down?
Yes, yes. Well, and part of what contributes to that, Dean, is particularly in publicly held companies,
Yeah.
there's so much leadership turnover Well, the next guy wants to rewrite the purpose statement or put his or her spin on it.
First thing they want to do.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I've made that mistake myself. I'll just admit it.
But if the purpose statement isn't underpinned by values that leaders are actually living out, stories they're telling to illustrate those values and how the purpose statement is a reflection of those values,
Yeah.
and how the purpose statement is being used by them and other leaders around them to make decisions, then it's just a bunch of words on paper, and people put them on a credenza or in a drawer, and they don't think anything about it.
You don't have any followers.
Because if all the behaviors around quarterly earnings, margin management, whatever number one you want to pursue,
Yeah.
then an inspirational corporate purpose doesn't mean anything.
You had another saying there. Even when you think you've arrived, you haven't.
Correct.
What does that mean?
Well, it means continuous improvement needs to be a cultural underpinning of the business, and what drove that for us was systems of listening to the customers on a continuous basis, in focus groups, in taste panels, in the restaurants, management by wandering around, spending quality time in the restaurants and visiting with operators and walking around dining rooms and visiting with customers.
Of course.
Proactive customer listening drives continuous improvement, and it helps you avoid reading your own press clippings and thinking you're great.
Hey, we've all been guilty to that once in a while.
We'll always identify things that you can do better. Always.
Exactly, and you guys are ahead of the curve, being out there getting feedback.
Well, it wasn't because we got a whole bunch of geniuses at the home office. It's because we had systems of listening, and at the forefront, the best listeners in the business are the Chick-fil-A operators who run the restaurants. Because their personal income is half of the pre-tax profits of that restaurant, they are highly motivated to listen to the customers.
Yep.
They're highly motivated to attract, keep, and listen to their team members. So they are the ultimate catalyst of continuous improvement because they're living with the customers every day, and they're highly motivated to listen to them.
Exactly. The other thing I like about Truett's model way back was, hey, I want to own all the stores, maybe not in the malls, but I want to own the real estate and hire independent entrepreneurs to run them. How were you able to transfer that culture to the thousands of locations?
Yes.
Because I don't see that in other franchises at all.
Well, it's no one thing, Dean. It's kind of like an onion. There's layers to make that work.
Oh yeah.
But it starts with what I went through in the recruiting, vetting, and hiring process. You build culture one hire at a time. So you have to have a recruiting and a vetting process that helps you in identifying people that not just the competency, but the character traits and the chemistry traits, people relationship traits.
Yep.
That are going to continue to contribute to your culture. So every hire is either making your culture better or hurting it.
Mm-hmm.
So the discipline of how you go about recruiting, selecting, vetting takes time. It takes discipline. Everybody needs to ultimately be following the same fundamental model and principles in that process. It took 5+ months for them to select me. Their recruiting, their vetting and recruiting process now is even longer than that.
I bet. It's like Google. It's hard to get in the gates.
The first step of preserving culture is being real clear about who you want to invite into the organization, and doing it in a way that it's not going to break any laws. You're not going to discriminate anybody. Then you move into the area of training. And the training needs to be more than just about procedures and systems and processes. it needs to be the stories that illustrate. Okay, you need to understand what's really important here at Chick-fil-A. Here's a story that illustrates something that's really important.
The stories and the
Here's another
folklore.
story. Here's another
Exactly.
story. And the
Yes.
stories come from customers. They come from operators. They come from Truett. They come from other leaders. But the stories are specifically designed to reinforce this is what's important in this business.
You know, I
This is
was
what we value. So that the training slash storytelling.
yeah,
And then the third piece of culture, and this may sound unusual, but it's measurement. Having systems that
yeah,
are completely committed to delivering what the brand promise is. The food's always going to be the same. It's going to be consistent. But here's the magic. How can you also measure hospitality and the customer experience and be able to deliver to the operator ongoing data that says you are not only delivering a great food experience, you're delivering a great hospitality people experience, or you're not. And here's where you appear to be missing. Your team members are missing the mark. My point is, data and accountability can also help preserve and reinforce your culture.
exactly. And it's often not tied to it, which is interesting. I've been on a lot of family enterprise boards, some really big ones that were later sold. And, the second and third generation, things don't always stay with the founding fathers. How do you think the company's doing in maintaining everything you just said?
I think they're doing a great job. But the foundation for that was obviously set by Truett. He did some very wise things. I'll give you just a few illustrations. He told all his descendants, second, third, fourth generation, didn't matter, still the same. If you want to derive income from Chick-fil-A, you either need to work at the home office and draw a salary, or you need to become an operator. You're not going to be getting big dividend checks. Most of the free cash flow that comes out of the business is going back into the business. It's going back into new stores. It's going back into improving the existing stores. It's going into improving the operational home office support of the operator family.
Right.
So that's one thing you told. Number two, after you go to college, and you will go to college, you got to work for somebody else at least 2 years. You can't come straight back to us. I want you to work in another customer-facing business at least 2 years or more. And second generation kids did that. They've all been doing that. Now, do they all come back to the business? No. I mean, some of them decide I want a career doing something else, and they step out, they get their education, they do their own thing. But for those that do come back to the business, they've been inculcated in the values of the business, purpose of the business, the values of the business, the same training models and systems that the entire Chick-fil-A family is exposed to on an ongoing annual basis. They've worked in another business. Then if they do come back to the business, they have to run a Chick-fil-A store for at least a year.
That'll keep them humble.
Find out how hard it is.
Yes.
Right. And then they can make a choice. Do I want to be an operator or come back into the home office? And if they come back into the home office, they're not going to come in as some officer. They're going to come in some reasonable, important role in the business where they're going to start learning the business function by function. So they'll go through multiple departments probably before they ever reach some high level of position in the business. Now, where they are today, the business passed to the second generation. Dan Cathy served as the CEO for about 10 or 12 years.
Yep.
He's now chairman. The CEO now is Andrew Cathy, his oldest son.
Third gen.
There are other Cathys in other key officer roles. There are in-laws in key roles in the business, and there are Cathy family members and in-laws who are running restaurants. So they've been able to preserve the principles that Truett set up.
Before we go real quick, just lot of these big corporations listening in, they're kind of lost in the forest sometimes. What advice would you give? A couple of things for a C-suite leaders to be thinking about in the second half of this decade and adjusting their approach to running businesses.
Well, I mean, I went through some. This business moves, man. And if you're not constantly trying to educate yourself, you can fall behind. So with that as a backdrop, here's some of the things I learned that really helped me. It didn't all begin at the beginning. It more evolution towards the end.
Trickles along, yeah.
Trickles along. So I like to always be reading. I'm not always reading leadership books. I particularly enjoy biographies and history books.
Yep.
I have learned a lot of things by studying history and other great leaders, even great leaders who failed or had tragedies. But read. I think I've already alluded to it. I think daily habit of reading the Bible, particularly books like Psalms, Proverbs, they're sources of wisdom, and you'll see something different in them every day. I got to where I try to dedicate at least 25% of my calendar, not in meetings, not doing what I was, not hands-on, being involved in planning or decision making or meetings, but actually what I call wandering around
and reflecting.
Where I wandered around the office, or I got on a plane and I visited stores, I visited markets. I would travel other members of my team, not because I had some agenda. I just wanted to spend time with them, watch how they work, hear what operators are saying to them. So the whole process of wandering around, I think, is really important to listen and learn. The third thing I've already alluded to is know what the customer thinks about your business, which means you got to spend time on the floor in the business. You got to read the data that's coming out of your customer listening systems. You've got to be an advocate for the customer, because if you advocate for the customer, it will be unavoidable that you will also be a change agent in the business.
Yeah, amen. Steve, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been great. You've been listening to Steve Robinson. This is Dean Tobias on the Reboot Chronicles. Please listen and watch and subscribe wherever you get your podcast or at rebootchronicles.com.